like a really good fight or squabble, as they say. Like, for example, I had some friends over this weekend. UFC 299, Dustin the Diamond Portier, a Louisiana guy from the 337. I'm not from the 337, but from the state that I'm from. Love Dustin the Diamond Portier. I love watching a good fight. I like watching a good squabble. Don't necessarily mind the squabble necessarily that happened yesterday between South Carolina women's basketball team and LSU. It is what it is. We saw multiple times this year, even Texas A&M Commerce, and I think Incarnate Word got in a big fight, the men's basketball team. It's going to happen in sports. You're going to have issues like this in sports, even at football practice. You see the clips all the time. You might watch Hard Knocks. Hell, your favorite SEC team or your team that's in the SEC probably going to get in a fight. Kentucky, who we'll talk about here tonight or today, they got in a fight, or there was a fight in the locker room. It was leaked not too long back. Fights and squabbles are going to happen in sports. What I do think is funny, though, is the reaction that comes after women's basketball more than any other sport. I think that when things happen in women's basketball, things or situations start to divide people and fan bases, which is fine. Rivalries will happen. And that yesterday makes the LSU South Carolina incident that happened, it makes it more of a rivalry. LSU has not been able to overcome South Carolina. They are trying to, even though they won a national title last year, but this is what makes a really good rivalry. The problem and the issue that I will always have in this, and I'm sure we'll talk about it tonight when we talk more of LSU on our AYS LSU show at 7. The issues that I have with this are pretty simple. I wish that the political side of things would go out of it. Kim Mulkey made a statement yesterday in reference to, I wish that Cardona would have done that to Angel Reese, pick on someone your own size. And wouldn't you know, it was taken and ran with in complete out of context. I just saw Shannon Sharp say something about this, and it was completely taken out of context. And he should a little bit be ashamed of himself, because he's from the South. And anybody from the South who says, hey, why don't you do that to the baddest dude or baddest girl on our team, he knows exactly what that means. Now, when you had Texas A&M Commerce and Incarnate Word fighting a couple of weeks ago or a month ago, Shannon Sharp didn't say anything about holding the coaches accountable in those situations and things that they said in the postgame. Now, obviously, that's because LSU and South Carolina are massively bigger brands than those two schools, but let's not act like fights in sports haven't happened. Cardona should have been thrown out. She was tossed. Okay. I don't think the incident with Johnson warranted what followed. Now, I would say that if something else would have happened, if Cardona would have gotten her face, maybe just pushed her, like got in her face and pushed her instead of just ramming into her, I think we would have had a completely different conversation. Massively different conversation. It goes to two things, though, and here is probably from a sports-related thing, the two biggest issues that I had. Number one, I love and, have a daughter myself. So when Flau'jae Johnson's brother ran out onto the court, I would hope that my son would defend his little sister beyond all costs. The problem with that is her brother should not have run out onto the court. Okay, I don't think fans in a situation like that have any business running out onto the court. It is what it is. The second thing, though, is we'll talk about Greg Sankey, because on our topics today, we got a lot of things we got to talk about around your SEC college football changing. Greg Sankey pretty much running the show here. How is the playoff structure? Are we going to get some big news this week? We'll talk about something that our good buddy Josh Pate said in his show yesterday that made me started thinking, and we talked about this too on the Ruffino and Joe show, but something that we need to talk about. But the biggest glaring thing from the SEC, the biggest weakness that the SEC has, it's not revenue, it's not fandom, it's not excitement. It's not notoriety. It's not even that they're not the pinnacle of sports pretty much in everything. Maybe not college men's basketball, maybe, but baseball, football, and the other two big ones, even women's basketball, they are the cream of the crop. One thing, though, that I think has been Greg Sankey's bugaboo or has been the biggest downfall of Greg Sankey mainly is, and due to the simple nature that, quite honestly, officiating in the SEC since he's taken over has gone down. And I do think that he is going to – now, I know that he's got a lot on his plate. He's trying to figure out the new college football playoff format. He's trying to figure out revenue when it comes to sports. He's trying to deal with NIL. Do we let players be a part of a collective bargaining agreement with the conference or the schools? How do we work that? I know that he has a lot on his plate. But he's got to also worry about, too, things that happen on the field, on the diamond, or on the court. That has been his biggest issue. Those are the two biggest issues that I have. A fight, a squabble, like what happened yesterday, I don't really mind it. I do hate that things get very political very quickly in a sporting event that involves that. Kick the damn girl out. She shouldn't have done it. Give Flaugier a tech. And then I get what they are doing with kicking both benches out, even though I think it's stupid. Maybe you're trying to do that to send a message, but you should have sent a message well earlier in that game by calling some of the fouls. Anissa Morrow has a black eye because she got elbowed in the face twice. No foul was called. Again, goes to the officiating part. There are so many different things that could have come of this, and I do hate over and over and over again how these things get political. I will say one thing, too, to South Carolina fans, or actually, let me backtrack. Let me say this to any fan that's out there, whether it doesn't matter if you watch college football, which we're going to talk a lot of college football here today. We'll go around and talk about spring. The issues that I have in sports is mainly this one. This is my number one pet peeve in sports. If a team does not win a conference title or a national title, fans say, well, that team that didn't win it sucks. Like if there's this discussion about another team that doesn't win their conference or national title, oh, that team sucks. What are we talking about here? It's got to be my biggest pet peeve. You know, if a team in football goes 9-3 or 10-2, or hell, even if they make it to a playoff, right? Like even if a team makes it to a playoff, like Texas. I saw a lot of people last year when Washington beats Texas. Oh, Texas just sucked. They're not back. They didn't suck. They were a pretty damn good football team. Under Sarkisian, they're going to continue to be a really damn good football team, whether you like it or not. With all due respect to people who love sports, if you think that a team who is competing for a title and loses sucks, it's not anybody else's fault that you don't have the vocabulary, nor that you can articulate that team doesn't suck. It's not anybody else's fault but your own. All right. We got tons to talk about. I'm sure we will talk about it a lot here tonight as well. Let me tell you our topics here today. We will talk about the new college football playoff format, what Greg Sankey is trying to do along with Tony Batiti. Why I don't necessarily agree with him, but why I think these automatic qualifiers shouldn't be. But what is the biggest concern when it comes to the SEC in the Big Ten? We won't talk a lot about the automatic qualifiers, but the revenue share, which is the big thing here. We have gone around the SEC, and we'll do all 16 teams. Okay, this is episode 6, so we have gotten to 6 teams here. Today, we go to the Bluegrass State. Now, we were supposed to go to Columbia, South Carolina, but because and due to the incidents that happened yesterday, I thought, coming from someone who also covers LSU, probably it was not a good thing to talk about South Carolina. So we're going to move Thursday's episode up. We're going to talk a little bit about Kentucky, the Kentucky Wildcats. I will say this about the Wildcats, though, while I take us. Look at this. Y'all like this Buc-ee's cup? I got to tell you, man, I experienced Buc-ee's for the first time this past year with my family. Buc-ee's, you have a friend in me. You have a friend in me. I wish they had one in the state of Louisiana. Maybe they do, or maybe one's coming. I wish they had one in South Louisiana. But regardless, we will go over to Lexington, Kentucky today and talk a little bit about the Wildcats. I will tell you, do not sleep on old Mark Stoops. I know my good friend Carter Bryant is going to hate this episode. Don't sleep on the Wildcats. We will touch on them. After we do that, we'll talk a little bit about spring, some of the storylines, like, for example, that are already coming out in spring. Who is going to be in the secondary for Alabama? I do think is a big concern for them. You know, look, they did have a lot of players leave in that secondary. Tyrion Arnold, Kool-Aid McKinstry, Caleb Downs, as well, Trey Amos, Jalen Key, and Christian Story. You also had Des Ricks leave. So, look, I think the biggest concern that nobody is talking about, for example, and we'll touch on this about a team like Alabama, is, man, they are so depleted in their secondary. I will tell you this as well. Kalen DeBoer's biggest weakness last year was the secondary. Could that be Bama's biggest issue again this year? So we'll touch on that. We'll touch on some other ones as well, and we'll get to at the end your questions, thoughts, questions, concerns. We'll do the hashtag Ask Blake. All right, let's get to a couple comments. Chris H. says, media, the South Carolina team takes on the personality of its coach. Yeah, that tracks. Look, I don't think quite the only issue, okay, that I had with Dawn Staley's comments, and I don't necessarily disagree because she's got to stick up for her team and her players, and I understand that, was that the first thing that she said is that, well, Flo J. Johnson came to me and apologized, meaning in the first sentence that you say, the first thing that you say, you're blaming it on Flo J. No, what you should have said was the actions that some of our players displayed was not conducive or what we want to do as a program. Now, she would go on later to say that when she was asked about it, but I just don't. And look, this has been an issue with – this goes beyond what happened yesterday. This, quite honestly, has been building between South Carolina, okay, and LSU for quite some time now, specifically when it comes to things that have happened with both coaches in the press. You know, for example – when Dawn Staley said that Nikki Fargas wasn't given this same type of commitment from the university, well, that might be true, but I don't know if Nikki cared enough. To be honest with you, she got fired. She wasn't having success. It's not on the administration. It's not on the university. It's on nobody. When you take over a program, you take over that program, which then again started and has continued every time South Carolina, maybe once, earlier in the year, there's always a political avenue that happens when South Carolina and LSU plays. And I got to be honest, for someone in my position, it does get pretty exhausting, to be honest with you. It gets very exhausting to have to continue to maneuver and what and how you say things, because if you don't say it correctly, people take it as a political slight. It makes me not want to talk about it. It makes me not want to talk about the sport. And our highest videos are of women's basketball. That's the part that drives me insane. Ace on YouTube says, please don't miss the fact that we just saw Poa carted off the court on a play less violent than what happened with Flaugier. That's a good point. That's a good point. Mike Prima says, what's up, fellas? Cajuns from St. Landry, Louisiana, the big 337. Yeah. I got to tell you. How do I want to say this? Dustin the Diamond Portier, man. You got to love it. You got to love it. Are we lagging for anybody? I see David said it. David, it might be your stream because it looks like, guys, are we good? Back there in the back. Guys, are we good back there? No, we're not lagging. All right, David, that might be on you. Guys, if we're give us a thumbs up or thumbs down. Are we lagging? I don't know if that's on our end or where that is. Because, guys, I'm not lagging on y'all's, correct? Okay. Oh, okay. Facebook's lagging? Okay. Go to you. All right. If you're having some issues, apparently Facebook is not. I just got word Facebook is, but YouTube is not. I don't know what that must be a Facebook issue. Must be a Facebook issue. All right. Let's get rolling. Let's talk about our good friends over at betonline.ag. Before we do that, everybody do us a favor. Hit the like and share. Share to all those groups on Facebook. Share to all those SEC groups. Hell, share to any group you want to. We talk a lot of SEC here. And it really pertains to our leading topic, really pertains to the entire SEC, which, quite honestly, it pertains to LSU. So some of you LSU people in here will need to do that. Share all those groups, all your social media pages, wherever you're listening, watching it on YouTube. Like, subscribe, and notification bell wherever you listen to podcasts. Rate, review, and subscribe. Let's talk about our good friends over at betonline.ag. Our good friends over at J&J Exterminating. Yeah. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way for you to wager on all of your favorite sports, contests, events with the first-to-market odds and lines. Find reviews for all the news for each league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, college sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all of your sports information for live in-game betting, props, and futures. Head on over to BetOnline today and use your mobile device to join and make your first sports bet. Use our promo code BELIEVE50, that's BELIEVE50, BLEAV 50, to receive your 50% off welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's betonline.ag, betonline.ag.
Louisiana is unique. The food, the festivals, even the bugs. No, not mud bugs. Unwanted bugs like these. The ones you don't want crawling in your home or business. Trust the Shield from J&J Exterminating. We've been protecting Louisiana homes for over 50 years, earning the trust of our clients because we deliver what we promise. Protect your home from pests. Get the Shield from J&J Exterminating.
J&J Exterminating. Yeah.
We're back. Tons and tons and tons to get to here when it comes to what the direction and what the avenue is of college football. Now, we've said this before, and I know that you, as a fan, a consumer, are probably tired and aggravated when it comes to having to talk about this on a daily basis. And for that, I completely understand where you're coming from. The problem is massive moves, massive decisions are being made here. And what our good buddy Josh Pate said last night, which I don't know if I want to say is reporting, but even stated in his show last night, that there could be some big news that happens this week when it pertains to college football. So I do think it's interesting. But in case you missed it, Ross Dellinger of Yahoo Sports is reporting a lot of the things that are going on behind the scenes when it comes to college football playoff expansion, probably going from 12 teams, which, by the way, we have not played yet. We have not played an expanded playoff beyond 4. It's only, we're going to 12, but we've only done a 14 playoff. So we don't even know the structure of what a 12 team would look like. But the powers that be wants to, at least it looks like they want to expand it to 14. But the expansion part in the reading, and Ross Dellinger puts this in his article, kind of has taken a pause because of what is going to go on with revenue. The automatic qualifiers has taken a pause because of revenue and what that would look like. Now, the Big Ten and the SEC are looking to take closer to 52 to 58%, depending on what article you read. And, I read something else that said maybe 52 to 58%, regardless of what that may look like. They've paused all other conversations about playoff expansion, automatic qualifiers, because there was a lot of pushback from the ACC, the Big 12, excuse me, when it comes to the way that revenue is shared. And I got to be honest with you, I 1000% agree with them to some extent. Let me explain. I am a person who believes that the 12 best teams in college football should get in. I do not believe in automatic qualifiers. So in this new playoff expanded world, we're looking at getting 3 permanent automatic qualifiers for the Big 10. Same for the SEC. The ACC gets 2, the Big 12 gets 2, and then there's one group of 5, and the rest are at large. The 3 are at large. Here's a problem that I have with that. This isn't the NFL. This isn't your sports league or soccer that's in Europe. This isn't Major League Baseball. This isn't the NBA. This isn't professional sports, because you have over 130 teams in college football, all that technically could qualify for being in the playoff, even the G5 teams who could be the top seed of a group of 5 opponent that can be in. College football is different than every other sport that you know because of recruiting and the way that you build your team, the way that you build your roster. Guys, quite honestly, there's not 12 teams that can win it all. We're about to find that out, much less 14. We're about to find that out very quickly. The problem that I had as just a massive college football fan is this. Why do we need automatic qualifiers? Why can't we get the 12 best or 14 best teams? Why can't every team get the equal amount of revenue? Now, I do understand that the SEC and Big Ten will be a bigger draw for the playoff, and probably why they want more of the revenue. I understand that, and I don't necessarily even disagree with them on that. The biggest problem in all of this that I have, and I do think that this could happen, is that I think more and more, day in, day out, we are moving to a 2 massive conferences, being the Big Ten and the SEC. As this continues to play out, I think that's where we're going. Now, it's interesting because ESPN, ironically, along with Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti, hold all the cards here. ESPN could, after the 2020, I think 6 or 2027 season, they could avoid their ACC contract, which would allow Florida State, as an example, to move on. ESPN can avoid it, and then the ACC would be dead in the water, which those teams would have to go to a different conference, either the SEC or probably the Big Ten. Here's where I see that Tony Petitti and Greg Sankey, who is quite honestly leading the charge on all of this, this is where the sport is going. Guys, we're going to 2 mega conferences. And I would assume that if it does not go the way that Tony Petitti and Greg Sankey want, they'll go away from the college football playoff. Now, the issues that come in all this are, why can't we just have one sense structure? What would end all of it would be, hey, man, the 12 best teams get in the playoff. 14 best teams get in the playoff. Everybody gets a revenue share. If you're in this game, if you're in this game, if you're in this game, if you win, if you lose. It's how a lot of teams do it. It's how a lot of pro teams do it, at least. Now, maybe they don't have a better structure. Maybe they do. I don't know. But day in, day out, this sport comes to a place where it's all about the revenue and money. Everything that they need to figure out gets put on a back burner because they got to figure out revenue. Now, I do think, and have said for over a year, that Greg Sankey, for an example, has had a plan that he wants to put in place, and he's doing it very deliberately, but he's also doing it in stages, not doing it all at once. But if you think that he's not running how things go here, you're wrong. He is, even if he does not have the title of this, he's pretty much more of an acting commissioner than we've ever seen, because he holds all the cards here. He could tell ESPN, yeah, I don't think we need to do that. And ESPN will probably have to say yes. We won't do that. What gets missed in all of this is that the fans, you, I, a lot of people, some of you might have wanted an expanded playoff, and that's fine. More games, I get that. But when you add more playoff games, that means the regular season takes a little bit of a dip. It always will. It'll be just like the NFL does. If you lose a game versus your rival and you're still in good standing to make the playoffs, the loss, although it sucks, doesn't really matter. And that is what's made college football special in a lot of ways. What makes college football very special is that day in, day out, week in, week out, game in, game out, the intensity factor is so high because you really don't have a lot of slip-ups. In college football now, and especially in a 12-team playoff, guys, a team can have 2 slip-ups and still make a playoff and make a run. That does degrade the regular season. People that say that it doesn't, they're wrong. And they know that they're wrong. Guys, I started a business in 2017. And majority of what we do, majority of what I talk about, and even starting 2 other shows, this one being Around Your SEC and the Ruffino and Joe show, all of them circle college football. It's the favorite thing. It's my most favorite sport out there. Now, I love college baseball. I love it to death. Don't get what I'm saying twisted. I just don't know where we're heading here. And, I've heard the rumors like you have in reference to, well, would the SEC and the Big Ten, would they do their own thing? Would they go away from the playoff and the NCAA? You're damn right they would, because they're making more money than anybody. They're making more money than anyone. They can, quite honestly, because of the revenue that is generated, what the fans generate for college sports in the South and in the Midwest, is what determines this. That's why they hold all the cards. It's going to be interesting to see how all of this plays out, man. It's going to be very, very interesting to see how college football winds up shaking up. I will tell you, and people say that I am when I say this, that it's just a very overall negative take. I think things are going to get worse before they get better. And maybe they need to get worse before they get better so that you can find your structure. That may be true. But if it takes a decade to do that, if it takes, because look, in 2030, we may have structure, right? Like we might have more of a structured base of what college football looks like. That doesn't stop the most chaotic 10 years of college sports and athletics and football that we've had. A decade is a long time. A decade is a long time. Some of you may be in your mid-30s, your mid-40s. Rewind the clock 10 years. Where were you 10 years ago today? What were you doing? Don't tell me that it's not a long time. And changes are always going to continue to happen in college sports. If there's one thing that NIL and the portal has taught us, or realignment has taught us, is that things are always going to continue to change in college athletics. What I told you 3 years ago remains the same and true today. You can be mad at the players because of NIL and the portal. But the biggest worries that I always had and will continue to have is not what the players are doing. Guys, quite honestly, players getting paid for their name, image, and likeness, and players leaving to go to a better program or going to a program so that they can get playing time, does it affect the sport? 1,000%. It 1,000% does. Nothing has changed the sport more than the suits and the bureaucrats that are trying to make more money for themselves. And and I know, your grandma knows, everybody knows, that guys like probably Greg Sankey, administrators, are getting money underneath the table from these big TV bureaucrats that are trying to make more money for themselves. That's how this game works. Now, you can say, Blake, that's not happening. but you know how deep room politics works. You're not immune to this. You've never been immune to this. You people that are grown, that you look, if you have a house, a mortgage, a family, and you've grown up and you're grown now, you know how backdoor office politics works. You know how politics works in general. To tell me that ESPN, CBS, Fox aren't doing backdoor shady deals so that they can get more money and how they're running college football, you're crazy to think that that's not happening. Nothing has changed the sport more. Nothing has changed the sport more than suits and bureaucrats that you have no idea who they are. Some of these people in the college football playoff committee, as an example, guys, don't even have football at their own programs. There's athletic directors on the playoff committee. Guys, they don't even have football at their schools. Yeah, let's let those guys run college football because they know how it's supposed to be done day in and day out, week in and week out. Sure. That's some good coffee. Sure, you do. All right. Always something here, man. Always something when it comes to college sports. You gotta love it. You gotta love it. All right. 42 of you on YouTube. We need you to do us a favor. Hit that like button for us. Hit that share. Do the same if you're on Facebook as well. You know what the bad thing about coffee in my business? I love coffee. I drink probably 2 or 3 cups of coffee a day. Normally don't eat until probably 2:30, and then after the shows at night, or even maybe even a little bit before. I drink coffee religiously in the morning. I'm just not a morning dude. I don't like, people are like, Blake, why don't you do it around the SEC at 8? No shot. The problem with coffee is once you drink it, when you're supposed to talk a lot, it doesn't normally work that well. Got to admit, though, man, if you're let me tell you this. If you own a coffee shop or you're a coffee provider, get in touch with us because I will put it all over the studio in here as well. All right. No questions, thoughts, concerns on that? No. Okay. Let's get to the next topic here. We have, through 6 episodes, or at least 5 episodes, now going into 6, have already started to go around your SEC. Now, what we're going to do in this series, we're going to go to all 16 teams. Maybe not Vandy. Yeah, we might not hit Vandy when it comes to breaking them down. But we're going to go around the SEC and talk about all the college football teams. Spring is here. Guys, before you know it, August will be here. It'll be time for football. August 31st, man, it's not a long way away. So we're going to break down some of these teams in the preseason and talk on them before the season starts. And obviously, we'll continue to go and bring on guests and break down college football. Today, though, we go to the Bluegrass State in Kentucky. You know, it's interesting. Let me start off with this. I do think that you can make the argument that Mark Stoops may be the best coach in Kentucky football history. I thought it was always crazy that he was wanting to go to Texas A&M. Now, what does that tell you? Or what does that mainly tell you that maybe he was trying to do? Do I think that Mark Stoops wanted a new venue? Maybe. I don't know if I necessarily believe that. But I think Mark Stoops wants to get over that hump. You know, there's one thing about coaches, especially guys like Mark Stoops, regardless if you believe it or not. They want to be able to win more. And I do think that Mark Stoops, as an example, is in that same boat, right? Like, I think Mark Stoops is in that same boat as a guy that wants to, now that there's a 12-team playoff, push to get there. I did think it was interesting that he was on the preface of becoming the next head coach at Texas A&M. I thought that would actually be a pretty good hire for them, even though their fans completely revolted. But let's break down the Kentucky Wildcats and what we should preview with them looking into the 2024 season. You know, listen, I know that a lot of people look at Kentucky, especially in football, and say, look, man, They're going to get 7, 8, 9 wins. They're going to be an okay team, but they can never get over the hump. And quite honestly, you're pretty much right. Mark Stoops at Kentucky, they've had some really good years, but just have not had the talent to overcome a team like Georgia. Well, mainly no one has, so it's not indicative on Kentucky. But they have been a pretty decent team under Mark Stoops. But this year, going into 2024, is completely different. 1,000% different than any other year under Mark Stoops. So let me explain. Now, Mark Stoops, if you remember during the season, had the viral clip about, well, listen, man, Georgia is out there paying for a lot of recruits and people are paying in the portal. If we want to compete with that, we got to have the money to be able to do that. Well, Kentucky fans heard him. And I think one of the biggest misconceptions about Kentucky is that they don't have money, because they do. There's a lot of money in Kentucky. They heard Mark Stoops last year when he said, listen, we got to get money, spend it, go do things in NIL. The fans and the boosters answered his call, and good on them for doing it. The biggest thing about Kentucky going into 2024 than any other season, now they've gone in the portal before and gotten quarterbacks. So the Brock Vandagriff thing, which we'll talk about, is not necessarily anything new for Kentucky. You know, obviously getting Will Levis, you got Devin Leary last year. That's not anything new in a Mark Stoops run, or at least since the portal has been here. They have used the portal at quarterback pretty decently, not great, but pretty decently. They added Brock Vandagriff. Now, remember, we'll get to him in just a minute. It's what Kentucky did in other places in the portal that I do think shocked some people here. Because, yes, they got Vandagriff, but they go and get Gerald Mincy, the right tackle from Tennessee. They go and get DeMonte Traynham from Ohio State, the running back. Can he be, now that you have Ray Davis that's out the door, can he be the feature back? Even though I think they got a lot of young, talented backs at Kentucky, can he be the vocal point of this offense? What, at least to me, what it made me look at Kentucky and say they're in this game, that they're playing in this game more than they ever have before, is when they went and got Jamari McClain from North Texas. Now, that name might not ring a bell. Maybe to some of you that are big-time college football fans, maybe remember this. But McClain was Macklin, excuse me, I call him McClain. Jamari Macklin was a big portal person that people were trying to go after. Macklin was one of those guys at North Texas that played at a lower school that everybody was offering him. You know, when Macklin hit the portal, I remember Georgia, LSU, Texas, so many teams in the SEC offered him right out of the gate. Now, last year, he had 57 catches, 1,004 yards, and 11 touchdowns. And of all places in the SEC that he could have gone, you know, LSU was coming off a run with Brian Thomas Jr. and Malik Neighbors. Well, that might have made some sense. You know, Georgia could be on another national title run along with Texas. That could have made some sense. But he went to Kentucky? Kentucky. Well, maybe Kentucky's actually being serious about what they're going to do in the portal. That by far is the biggest addition that, and right now, and I know Brock Vandagriff will get all of the headlines here, and he probably should. He's a quarterback. He was a highly rated guy. He's very talented. But Jamari Macklin, getting him, I think, showed people around the country that they will play and they want to get better on offense. It also showed that Stoops realizes that they got to get better on the outside. They have to get better at the wide receiver position. There's no bones about that. There's nobody in their right mind that would tell you that they do not have to have better weapons on the outside. Offensive line wasn't bad. Their running game wasn't bad. Ray Davis had a really good year. There were parts of the times of the seasons last year that we were having conversations if Ray Davis should be in the Heisman discussion. Their running game at Kentucky has always been pretty decent. But going and getting Brock Vandagriff, too, from Georgia is a big deal. Now, we have not seen Brock Vandagriff in any serious playing time in the SEC. Now, we saw that Carson Beck at Georgia beat him out. It was what it was. But I do think that Brock Vandagriff is a very talented quarterback, and it's going to be interesting to see what they do here. He's got some pieces. I think they return a lot of really good pieces along the offensive line. I think that you added some guys at wide receiver, with Macklin being the big one. You got some guys returning. Offensively, I think that they have the ability to be much, much better than they were at any point last season. And I don't even think that that's a hot take. But it's also interesting, though, because Kentucky, as an example, or Kentucky, for an example, had to go and replace their replace their offensive coordinator. They do that with Bush Hamdan. And a lot of people don't know who Bush Hamdan is, and that's fine. But I got to tell you, I also don't know if Kentucky didn't get better from a play calling standpoint on the offensive side. Now, I know you can say to yourselves, well, Blake, that's a little bit much. But Hamdan, man, he's been in a lot of good places. He was a quarterback's coach in Missouri. He was the OC last year at Boise State. Okay, he was at Washington, where he was offensive coordinator in 18 and 19. He's got NFL experience. He was a QB's coach in 2017 for the Atlanta Falcons. A lot of people like Bush Hamdan. Now that he is the first-time offensive coordinator in the SEC, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Here's the difference, though, and where we just got done talking about the offense. So, Kentucky fans, in this clip, okay, you're going to be like, well, Blake didn't talk about the offense. Go look on the live show, because right now we got to look on one side of the football. That why I start asking myself, is this the year that Kentucky could make a little bit of a run? Let me explain. Guys, when you look at Kentucky defensively, the number one thing for me that stands out is how many older players they have on this roster. Now, when I'm looking at some of the film last night about Kentucky and a lot of the pieces that they have along the defensive line that are returning, some of the outside pressure guys that they have returning, I'm like, man, that guy's returning, but he's a senior. How is that? Was he redshirted, COVID? Guys, Kentucky has 17-plus players on defense. Now, some of them may hit the portal after spring, and that's okay. 17 juniors and seniors. A lot of them redshirted. You know, they return Josiah Hayes, who had 4.5 tackles for loss last year. J.J. Weaver, the outside guy who had 7 sacks. He's going into year 6, by the way. That's a grown-ass man playing against college students. Maxwell Harrison, who I said last year may have been the most underrated DB in all of the SEC. He only had 5 picks last year. I mean, dude was absolutely fantastic at times. God has to get better. He had some blown coverages here and there, but, man, was one of the better cover corners in the country. De'Eric Jackson, their middle backer, had 89 tackles last year, 2 sacks, 2 interceptions. Oh, and by the way, they added Dumas Johnson from Georgia. The depth that this team has defensively, too. I mean, Octavius, okay, he's a guy that had 3.5 sacks. I look at this team. If they can remotely have a better pulse on offense, this team is one of the most senior-led teams in the country, which historically in college football, this isn't a Blake Ruffino stat. This is what we've seen around college football just historically. Teams that have this many seniors, teams that have this many guys that return, normally make a run that people aren't expecting. When you have pretty much a couple of juniors and a senior-led team, a high productive senior-led team, there's not a lot that they haven't seen. I think Kentucky, for me, is one of the most interesting teams in the SEC this upcoming year. Now, What is realistic for Kentucky going into 2024? We have a lot of questions. Most of them on offense. Actually, a lot of them, if not all of them, come on the offensive side of the ball. You have the new offensive coordinator. You have a new quarterback that hasn't had any experience in the SEC. You got a new right tackle and Gerald Mincey. You got a new receiver who has big playability. Can you get him the football enough in Macklin? The problem is that I look in Kentucky and say to myself, man, they have a brutal schedule if they want to try to make a playoff run. They start off the season. Now, no road game in the first 4 weeks I think is really interesting, right? They play Southern Miss, South Carolina, Georgia, Ohio in the first 4 games, all at home. Guys, there's a very strong chance they come out of that 3-1. Now, Georgia being at home is obviously the biggest game. But do they look ahead when they're playing South Carolina? Do they look ahead of that Georgia game before when they're trying to play South Carolina? I don't think that they will because, again, you have a very senior-led team. But coming out of 3-1 in that stretch would do them absolute wonders. I don't know. I just don't see a world where they could upset Georgia, even if it is at home. I just don't think that we know enough about them with Brock Vandagriff, a lot of the pieces that they have offensively. I don't think you can make that assumption right now. You can't just look at Kentucky and say to yourselves, oh, man, they could, we're at home. You have no idea. Now, Brock Vandagriff could have a good game, but they've seen Brock Vandagriff. They know his ability. They know the strengths and weaknesses that he has. He's probably going to be amped up for that game, too. Probably good that he has an SEC game before that to get his feet wet a little bit before he's got a face-off on his old team. I do think that'd be interesting. But there are a couple of games here for Kentucky that I circle. Look, they play Georgia at Ole Miss, which is the first road game, by the way. Not until week 5 do they have a game on the road. Vandy, they got to go to Florida, which is always tough. Regardless of what you think of Billy Napier, it's going to be tough to go into Ben Hill Griffin Stadium and get a win. Tennessee and Texas. The Tennessee and Texas game are also on the road. Guys, visibly off the start. There's 3 games on their schedule that just on paper you look and say to yourselves, I don't think they can win it. Is 9-3 their ceiling, or can they beat one of those teams that they're not supposed to? Louisville's also in there at the end of the year that's at home. That is a team that competed for the SEC championship game a year ago. The reason I think that they're the most interesting team in the SEC right now is because I love a team that has this many senior-led guys. I think that they're developed. I think that they're smart. I think they're going to play some really good defense. I just don't know right now on March the 11th, 2024, the year of our Lord, that they can overcome. We're probably going to get a lot of the same stuff that we saw and have seen from Mark Stoops at Kentucky. Now, to wrap this part up, my question becomes to Kentucky fans. Now that the boosters, now that you have spent money and going into the portal and getting players and being pretty active in football, is the clock ticking for Mark Stoops? Because if you ask yourself the question, Mark Stoops probably has the easiest or one of the easier jobs in the SEC. Man, look, man, you win 7, 8, 9 games a year. You're going to be royalty when it comes to football there. But when boosters start giving you money and you have the same type of success that you've been having, those are big questions that you have to answer here. I don't know. I just those 3 games, Georgia, at Ole Miss, at Tennessee, at Texas. Georgia, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Texas. Guys, that's brutal. They could go 0-4 in all 4 of those games. The thing that if you're Kentucky that you have to do is not slip up to the teams that you're supposed to beat. Like, you can't go to Ben Hill Griffin Stadium at Florida and lose a game that you're not supposed to. You got to win that football game. Could they go 2-2 that stretch? Who do they beat? Do they beat Georgia? Do they beat Texas? And you can make the argument that Georgia and Texas are the 2 best teams in the SEC right now when it comes to football. Not an easy slate for old Mark Stoops. I could see a team that a high ceiling gets to 9 wins. Anything above that is exceptional. I just think 8-4, 9-3 is where you could see Kentucky because I think they're more talented than everybody else than they play. I think they're more talented in Florida, South Carolina, all of them. Maybe they can slip up, or not, I want to say slip up. Maybe they can go to Kentucky or Tennessee. Maybe they can go to Knoxville and beat Tennessee. I think that's a tough game. Hell of a tough game. Just don't know if they can do it. All right. I love the Buc-ee's Cup. Gotta love it. Yes. Guys, I see it. I'm getting a lot of hate on my Kim Mulkey take. Oh, well. Doesn't really matter to me. I mean, when these people come after me, man, like how many followers do they have? This guy's got 29. All right. This guy's got 29. Yeah, pretty not going to entertain you. Just not going to do it. Not at all. All right. Let's do this. Let's talk about our good friends over at Home Field Apparel, our good friends over at Jay and Sermonating. Spring football has started for most of the SEC. Georgia starts this week. We got some things that we need to talk about. We do that next. Stay with us.
Rufino and Joe Show is brought to you by Home Field Apparel, which is the best, without a doubt, premium collegiate apparel brand that is out there. They have over 150 different colleges that you can choose from, whether you're an Illinois fan or a Rutgers fan, maybe you're an LSU fan like Blake, or maybe you're an Alabama fan, whatever it is, even Idaho. They have so many different designs for so many different football programs that I can guarantee you're going to find some great stuff to help root for your favorite team. I've already gotten my Notre Dame stuff. Blake has his LSU stuff. Make sure you head on over to homefieldapparel.com to check out your team's collection of clothing apparel that they have on the website. And when you do so, when you check out, make sure you use promo code RufinoJoe to get 15% off your order. That is RUFFINO, Rufino Joe. Head on over to homefieldapparel.com and get your college gear today.
J&J has protected Louisiana homes and businesses for over 60 years.
Call him today, make the pests go away. J&J Exterminating. Yeah.
So spring football is underway for a lot of teams in the SEC. We're going to just pick a couple of them at random and some of the things I think that are the biggest storylines in all of it. And I was going to try to go in alphabetical order. If I don't hammer me over it. You know, the biggest news in college this past year, obviously, was Nick Saban retiring from the University of Alabama. And I do think that we talked a lot about players leaving Alabama, whether it be draft or whether it be them going into the portal, what have you. But we haven't necessarily completely dove into some of the things that are going on in Alabama, and let me explain. You know, camp is starting in Tuscaloosa, and I do think on the field, there's a big question that you have to ask yourself. How depleted is this team in the secondary? Now, I look at them and all the things that they are losing and all the players that they are losing in Tuscaloosa at DB. Look, Tyrion Arnold isn't going to be there. Kool-Aid McKinstry, Caleb Downs, all are out at Alabama. You also have key contributors like Trey Amos, who's now at Ole Miss, Jalen Key, Christian Story, and even some guys that you probably were expecting to stay, like Earl Little, Des Ricks, and Jameer Grimsley. The bottom line becomes for me, and I think the biggest concern, like I'm not necessarily worried about Alabama along the offensive line. I think that they've recruited and they've retained well there. I still think that they got a lot of really good pieces at wide receiver and at running back. Austin Mack, Lonergan, Dylan Lonergan, Austin Mack, all like even at quarterback, Jalen Milroe. They have a lot of really good pieces that they can work with on offense. The biggest concern with Alabama is simple, is what they have going on at DB. It is the most depleted part of their roster or unexpected part of their roster that we have no idea what to expect going into 2024, which I do think on the field could be a very big concern for Kalen DeBoer in year one. Let me explain. Now, last year, the biggest problem with Washington, like they did a lot of great things under Kalen DeBoer. Offense, defense, O-line, D-line, wide receiver, linebackers, defensive tackle. They did a lot of really good things last year. It's what led them to a national title. The biggest problem that they had, the most massive problem that they had at Washington, was how many yards they were giving up in the air. Their secondary, for what it's worth, was horrendous a year ago, even on the national title run. Guys, there was at no point other than 1 week when they were not in the hundreds when it comes to passing yards allowed. Now, Caleb DeBoer is in a place and in a situation where he goes into a room that might not be that good. Now, Malachi Moore, is someone that is still there, going to play well, and I think is a good defender. Damani Jackson, you get him from the portal, USC. Really good. But I still think that there's a lot of question marks there. Caleb Downs isn't walking through that door. The experience of Kool-Aid McKinstry isn't walking through that door. A lot of the big-time pieces that you were expecting to be there are out of the door. They're not there anymore. I do think the early storyline in Alabama is what's going on at DB. At Arkansas, pick one. Pick a storyline. I don't know what the biggest storyline is. Obviously, I think it's what is going on with Bobby Petrino. KJ Jefferson's gone. Taylon Green is now there. I really just believe that we're going to have to monitor what goes on in Arkansas. I do think that Sam Pittman is a sitting duck. Let's see how that progresses, because there's some chatter coming out of Fayetteville, not a lot, but I do think that there is some high expectations and a lot of people thinking that they're going to be tons better on offense. Got to wait and see, though, man. Arkansas fans like to fluff up what they're doing in Fayetteville that never comes to pass or be true. The Auburn Tigers, look, Peyton Thorne, I thought it was very interesting that Auburn and Hugh Freeze didn't go into the portal and grab a quarterback from the portal. Listen, I know that there's a lot of young quarterbacks that are on that roster, especially with Walker White being an early enrollee there. Does he, make his way? Do they, how does that work with him? Even with guys like Hank Brown that are in that room, I just don't think Peyton Thorne is the answer. And I do wonder what it looks like if there's a big-time quarterback that hits the portal in the spring, if Auburn is not a key player there. I think they need to be. Peyton Thorne is not going to lead them to where they want to go. To say I was shocked that they didn't get a bigger name from the portal, I thought that Cam Ward would have been a perfect fit for Hugh Freeze. Perfect. Would have made them, honestly, to be real with you, might have made them a playoff contender because of how good Hugh is at calling plays, what he can do and how he can maneuver. They got a lot better at wide receiver. Thorne is just not going to be a guy that leads them to where they want to go. I think they need to move on from them. The Florida Gators. Look, I've said a lot about Florida, and I do think that adding a guy like Austin Armstrong a year ago, adding a guy like Ryan Roberts this year could help them defensively. Man, I don't like. I see a lot of the storylines that are coming out of Gainesville, like a lot of positivity, like Graham Mertz, DJ Lagway looks really good. They got some really good pieces along the defensive line. They got some actually really good players along their defensive line, Cam Jackson being one of them. Guys, every time I see an update that comes out of Gainesville, quite honestly, doesn't really matter to me because I think that they're going to lose the last 5 games of their season no matter what. I mean, I just don't think that there's anything that they can do, to be real with you. I will give Billy this. There's a lot better personnel in Florida right now, or at Florida right now, than people are giving him credit for. Without question. Maybe he can make something of it. Maybe he can get to 7-8 wins. Maybe he better, because if not, he's out the door. But every time I see a storyline, look, and the big storyline is like, hey man, is this Billy Napier's last spring? But they do have a lot of good pieces that they recruited, and they have. I mean, dude, guys, they do got some pretty good talent there. Just don't think they're going to be coached well enough. I don't think that they have enough to get over the hump for that schedule that they got to get into. The Missouri Tigers, a lot of things clicking, a lot of what you would expect there with them. We talk a lot of LSU, so I'm not going to talk about LSU here. We've only been to one practice. Offense, the buzz around Missouri that I'm hearing is that they think that Missouri can have one of the best offenses in the country. And if that's the case, it's going to basically come down to how well did the replacements that you had for Blake Bakers and some of the guys that you had enter the draft, how quickly were you able to develop and replace those kinds of guys as well? Oklahoma Sooners, we're actually going to try to get somebody next week to talk a little bit about Oklahoma. Oklahoma, man, we don't talk about them enough in the SEC. And I think of all the teams right now, Oklahoma might be another interesting one to me. Their win projection in total in Vegas is 7.5. Man, they got a brutal schedule. They got one brutal ass schedule. So we'll see. We'll see. All right, guys. We will see y'all again on Wednesday for Around Your SEC. Y'all have a good one. Have a good day. See you at 6. Peace.